Drivers, to your cars.
Welcome to the Walt Disney World 100 here on the Modern Stock Car Cup Tour. This evening we will have an exciting race on our first, I guess you could call it now defunct, speedway, as we are here in Lake Buena Vista, Florida, for the third and final race of our so-called Florida Swing. If you're not exactly sure what that was or is, it's that in our schedule this year we had essentially a three-race stretch where the first three races of the season were all in Florida. We had the Daytona 250 where I ended up winning the race, followed by Homestead Miami Speedway where Jack Husky took the checkered flag, and here we have a nice 40-car field here at Walt Disney World Speedway. Now, I say now defunct because this 1 mile, I call it a mini Pocono, because if you take a look right here at the track info, you can essentially see it is essentially a mini Pocono, only 3 turns, and in fact the entire track was essentially temporary, because they needed to use it for the Craftsman Truck Series in the late 90s and early 2000s, and then after that was done, and after all the other events were done, including IndyCar, they shut down the track, and even everything from pit road to the grandstands were all temporary, and they were moved off-site as soon as the racing season concluded. Now, of course, Walt Disney World Speedway was shut down in 2015 and eventually demolished after a fatal accident in one of those racing experiences where you paid to get inside a race car, you race it around a track. There was an unfortunate accident that had occurred involving a man passing away in an accident, and eventually the speedway was closed down in 2015, and now we get to relive the wonders of WDW Speedway in Lake Buena Vista in the virtual video game world. Now, just a few notes for this race. We do have 2 new drivers entering. We have Armin Salvador in the 64. You can see him right here. He's in his Boeing Dodge. And then almost right behind him in the 74, we have Brooks Bergensmith in the Batman Chevrolet. Now, he is only running this race for this Batman paint scheme for 1 race, and that is because he has not submitted an official paint scheme to us yet. So we are using the default paint scheme for the 74. That is in the Manx 19 mod for NR 2003, so we're essentially just using that. They're essentially starting close to each other. I mean, they're starting near the front, which is interesting. But anyways, we have a 1 mile track, 100 laps. It's the Walt Disney World 100 here on the Modern Stock Car Cup Tour. We are about to hear the driver start your engines call, so let's listen in.
Drivers, start your engines!
Alright, so these 40 drivers will make their way around the racetrack. Let's take a look at our starting lineup. In row 1, we have Cole DeMarco and Darian Arnsdorf. In row 2, we have Creed Daniel and Wyatt Floor. Row 3, we have Richard Birmingham and Chase Buck. Row 4, we have Santiago Alvarez and Egristo Papageorgis. Row 5, we have Nolo Hamilton and Esko Laukkanen. Row 6, we have the rookie, Armin Salvador and Gustav Adolf II. Row 7, we have Ryan Adema and Brooks Bergensmith. Row 8, we have Christian Coppola and Ty Rogers. Row 9, we have Dan Wilkins and Stephanie Larson. Row 10, we have Jack Husky and Jacob Thibodeau. Row 11, actually, whoa, there's actually a lot of interesting stuff going on right here. Looks like they're going to catch up, but row 11 will be Ethan Mitchell and Brady Wilmington. Row 12 will be Winty Wolf and Kyle Driscoll. Row 13 will be Arthur Xavier and Tim Moore, and then after that, it's just very, very confusing as Area Carmona will pull a chase buck. And we will actually cross the stripe. There's a caution flag out. So they will actually start the race under caution. So now we will go green next time by. Let's take a look at the 54 of Area Carmona. Let's see what happened to him. So you can see they get starting, and he's obviously not going fast enough. And then he tries to pull over, and then David Iller just completely wrecks him. We essentially just had a wreck on the backstretch, so we brought out a caution on the pacing laps. Has that ever happened? I don't think so. But it's definitely going to be interesting, because right now, pace car is headed off of turn number 2. And he will make that left turn in the pit lane. Cole DeMarco, your Season 1 champion for the first time this year, is on the pole, and it's going to be at Walt Disney World Speedway. Green flag, 39 cars on the racetrack. That's just really unfortunate for the 54 of Area Carmona. He had a really good finish at Daytona, finished inside the top 10, and now he will have nothing to show for it because he ended up getting wrecked on the pacing laps. We saw an interesting pace lap moment at Homestead where Chase Buck in the 19 ended up going to pit lane for some sort of issue on his splitter. And then, you know, basically started the race a lap down. And then worked his way back and finished second. Great accomplishment for him. As we are under caution, Area Carmona's back on the racetrack, but what happened? Looks like Gustav Adolf II has some damage. So we are under caution on lap 3, and we don't know what happened. Area Carmona now zooming through. I just want to know what in the world happened. Looks like some of these guys back here have some damage, so I mean, let's take a look at the replay. I think it might have been something with 54. 54 is leaving pit lane. Now at this point, let's take a look at like the cockpit or something, or the roof, because I want to see when they go under caution. I want to see like the exact moment. There's not really a lot of. All right, so there's the caution light is out. Oh, Brooks, no, not Brooks Bergensmith. I finally see what happened. It's Armin Salvador. So here is what happened. They're going 3 wide in the one. Adama on the inside, Adolf on the outside, Salvador in the middle. It's just a car sandwich going in the one, and then Salvador gets turned. So that is essentially what happened. It took me a while to figure it out because I couldn't see it. Some of the camera angles on this racetrack aren't exactly the greatest, so we kind of have to deal with it as is, but if I thought Homestead wasn't bad enough, we had a wreck on the pacing lap, then we have a wreck that it took me about 2 minutes to find. We'll be back after this. Area Carmona will line up on the inside of the 22 as we will go back under green on lap 7 at Walt Disney World Speedway. Already an incredibly obscure, well not obscure, just an interesting race with a wreck on the pacing laps involving Area Carmona and David Iller, and then a wreck that, the caution lights came on and we couldn't even see what happened. So it's DeMarco, Arnsdorf, and Wyatt Floor in your top 3. We will go green once again from Lake Buena Vista. Area Carmona already blocking the leaders. That can't be good for everybody else on the racetrack. The only guy it will help is Abel DeMarco. Because as of right now, all 39 cars are on the lead lap. And coming off of 3, remember I like to call this track almost like a mini Pocono. Because there are only 3 turns during this entire track. Once again, like a triangle, but remember that this track was also very temporary and was not intended to be up all year round until it was demolished in 2015. So you just kind of have to put that in perspective when you're looking at this sort of track. It may have a weird configuration, but they had to build around, or they had to have some pretty tight configurations in order to make it work. When you have, like, I've been to Disney World, let's see, 4 times, because I went in 2011, 2013, 2016, and 2019, and I'll probably be going again in 2022. But the thing is that with this racetrack, the interesting thing about it is, everything is so tight in Disney that you just, it's impossible to get something like this permanent up there. You just can't. And that's why this track is such a weird configuration. Even turn 2 is a little bit odd. We'll take a look at that later, why it's so wonky. But it's because of the configuration that they're literally building around roads that they have to work with. So Abel DeMarco, who was your pole sitter and also last year's champion after winning 4 races and finishing with 409 points. Of course, he won at his home track of Watkins Glen International, which was his first win. And of course, he ended up winning 3 more races throughout the season, including 2 road courses, because he also won at Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez in Mexico City, which is a track that we ended up racing at in Season 1, but didn't end up racing at in Season 2. Or we won't, because it's not on the schedule. The only road courses on the schedule are Sonoma, Watkins Glen, Canadian Tire, and the Charlotte Roval. And Sonoma, Watkins Glen, and the Roval are all still on the schedule, but Canadian Tire is new. And I think the moderators have all decided, maybe not in a joint fashion, but we've all decided essentially that we won't be really returning to Walt Disney World Speedway next year. Of course, you have to make it to next year to make that happen. But right now, Abel DeMarco out in a huge lead on lap 13 by over 1 second over the second place driver Darian Arnsdorf and the number 98 Haas Ford. And some shuffling going on behind here. Here is Wyatt Floor and Creed Daniel battling for the 3rd position. Daniel running the middle line. Everyone's essentially running almost single file. But right now the lead for Abel DeMarco grows bigger as we go on. Cars are sliding a little bit. From what I have experienced from racing on this track in this game, in test runs and everything like that, what I have experienced is that this track is going to be one of those tracks that will just kill your right front tire. You know, that, and we're going to probably see, if we have a long green flag run, we'll probably also see a long green flag, a cycle of green flag pit stops. Now, that's not guaranteed, of course, because, you know, we have to get there first, but right now, it's looking like we're going to end up having a green flag pit stop if, of course, the field keeps spreading out like this. DeMarco has a 1.3 second lead over Darian Arnsdorf. See that infield there? That kind of screams temporary. Everything's in a tent. There's not that many trailers out there in the infield. And remember, the Craftsman Truck Series was not the only form of competition to race here at Walt Disney World Speedway. There was also the IndyCar series. Now, I'm not exactly sure when they ran here, but I can imagine it was also in the 2000s. As Abel DeMarco still dominating. Right now, he is still the leader all-time in MSCCT wins. Of course, he's one of just 5 drivers to return from Season 1 to Season 2. The others being the 47 of Richard Birmingham, obviously me, the 77, and the 15 of Jay Bird, and the 16 of Santiago Alvarez. But DeMarco had 4 wins last season, and of course, with 82 laps to go, he could win race number 5 in his career. But of course, I shouldn't get I shouldn't get too far over my head, because this is the 2nd season and the 3rd race of the 2nd season. So you cannot get too complacent. And speaking of complacency, Abel DeMarco had about a 1.5 second lead over Darian Arnsdorf earlier in this race during the green flag, and now that lead has shortened to about a half second and probably less. As Arnsdorf is essentially going to be there. If DeMarco messes up on a corner, he very well could lose that lead, and he is right there. This is going to be a nice battle for the lead. Take a look at this view right here. They are extremely close. The 98 does a little bit of a brake check. This reminds me of Darlington a little bit from last season. We saw a bunch of brake checking, and it gave the leader essentially a clear path because everyone was brake checking and they weren't taking any advantages. The only lead changes we will see are probably either from under caution or from green flag pit stops. But even though we still have just under 80 laps to go, still can't guarantee anything here from Walt Disney World Speedway. And now his lead is starting to jump back out again. He got as close to basically on his back bumper earlier, but now old DeMarco kind of slid a little bit, and he leaves the door wide open for Arnsdorf. The question is, will he take the advantage? Area Carmona is there. He's currently running in the 40th position because he is off the lead lap from that wreck that happened on pit lane. So right now he's not in contention, but if DeMarco messes up on a corner like he did last time, I will not be surprised if the 98 finally jumps and ends up taking the lead away for our first lead change of the afternoon. About a quarter of the way through a race. The top 10 is currently looking like Abel DeMarco, Darian Arnsdorf, Wyatt Floor, Creed Daniel, Chase Buck, Richard Birmingham, Egristo Papageorgis, Esko Laukkanen, Santiago Alvarez, and Nolo Hamilton. And Wyatt Floor is going to try to make a pass on Area Carmona. Remember, Carmona is literally in position number 40 because he wrecked under the pacing lap. Or the pacing laps, I should say, because that wreck did cause a caution. We technically have had 2 cautions during this race, because one happened under the pacing lap. And then as we cycle through the field even more, In 11th is Ryan Adema, followed by Christian Coppola, Ty Rogers, Brooks Bergen-Smith making his debut. He's currently running 14th. You can imagine that would be good for his points. Stephanie Larson in 15th. Tim Moore, Brady Wilmington, Jack Husky, who won last race at Homestead. He's running around the middle of the pack. Dan Wilkins and Ethan Mitchell, that rounds out your top 20. Then followed by Felix Rizzo, Carl McKinney, Jay Monin, Jacob Thibodeau, who was also involved in that terrible accident at Homestead last race. Thibodeau got hit by Ethan Mitchell and went upside down into the catch fence, bringing out a red flag. Just a terrible accident. And then followed by Greg Shetner, Kyle Driscoll, Leo King, who unfortunately has had 2 DNFs this season. What he's trying to do, finish the race. He was wrecked by Winty Wolf at Daytona around the middle of the race, and then also got caught up in that accident with Jacob Thibodeau and Ethan Mitchell at Homestead. So he's running in the 27th position right now, but honestly, I think for this number 17 car of Leo King, that would be the best case scenario for them, because that means they're not going to DNF and they're not going to go to the garage early. But we still have a long way to go here at Walt Disney World, so let's not jump the gun. To round out your top 30, we have Patrick Starr, Arthur Xavier, and Mitchell Collins. And then for the remainder of the field, we have David Iller, who was involved in that, I guess, lap 0, because it was under the pacing lap, who was involved in that wreck. Jay Bird in 32nd, Bryce Durlocker, Luis Aguilar, Armin Salvador, who was involved in the lap 2 or 3 accident that brought out our second caution, Dakota Bennett, Faris Khalil, Winty Wolf, and Gustav up to second. And that is your 39 cars on the lead lap, and Abel DeMarco still in the lead, 70 laps to go from Walt Disney World. I have a feeling it's going to be one of those races where you have just a long green flag run, and the really only exciting action is going to be the pit stops that will happen later on in this race, maybe around lap 60 or 70. Probably from the way that we might even see more pit stops, not for gas, but for tires. As I said before, this track in particular, considering how tight it is and how tight the corners are, it will eat up your right front tire. As you can even see, the 22 car, they are basically leaning coming off of the corner because of how much it wears down the right front tire. You know, how hard you have to turn left. Even me, I'm not the greatest racer, but when I race at this racetrack in particular, I get tight in the corners after lap like 5, and I can barely turn the thing after lap like 10. So for these cars on the racetrack, they have to be very conservative when it comes to their tires, and they have to make sure that they're not going into the corner too hard, or else it will be bad for them. Just no clue yet exactly when the fuel window is going to be. I'm assuming maybe around lap 60, because we already had a caution, but nobody really went to pit lane for that. And remember, the longer you're under caution, it also takes a toll on your fuel as well. Ryan Adema in 92, he told me a good piece of advice, that under caution, if you have 1 lap of fuel under caution, if you have 1 lap under caution, it's essentially going to use 2 laps worth of fuel. Now, of course, that is for sprint cars. I don't know how that applies to actual stock cars like these, but I'm sure that it would be pretty similar. And you know, the longer you're under the pacing lap, and the longer that you are under the caution flag, which we saw early in this race, I can't be too surprised if you ask me. As Adema just made a pass into the top 10, past Nolo Hamilton, and he quickly gave it back up, so they're fighting for the 10th position right now. Nolo Hamilton, a native of Vancouver, British Columbia in Canada. He is one of 2 Canadian drivers in our league this year, the other being Faris Khalil from Toronto. As Ryan Adema really fell back, he went from 10th to 12th, falling behind Christian Coppola in 31. They're going 3 wide here, and Coppola getting a little bit loose off the corner. Can't imagine that would be too good. The front is essentially just all spread out at this point. with the 22 of Cole DeMarco leading lap number 36 and having about a 0.8 second lead over Darian Arnsdorf, and the third place car, Wyatt Floor, is 2.5 seconds back, but that's mostly because of Ariya Carmona, who's off the pace. And then you also have Richard Birmingham, who's in 5th. He's about, 6th. He's about 3 seconds behind the leader, and then it just drops to 5.7 seconds for the 7th place car, Agristo Papageorgis. And then as you round out the top 10, Nolo Hamilton, who's in the 33, he's in 10th, and he is just over 9 seconds behind the leader. So even just a long green flag run that's taken up about a quarter of the race at this point, it has already spread out everyone. And I don't know if there will be another caution, but I have sort of a hunch where if there will be a caution, it will be during the green flag pit stop. We saw that at Daytona last season. Now, of course, that was before we decided to put the races on YouTube, so I can't really show a highlight from that race. But it was on lap 28 where Larry Barker and Jeffrey McClintock, two drivers who are no longer in the league, they essentially got tangled up and in one way or another tried to both get on pit road and essentially wrecked, bringing out the first and only caution of that year's Daytona 250. And at a track like this in Walt Disney World, where you only have 3 turns and it's extremely tight, we could see 1 or even 2 green flag pit stops. Of course, depending on how long the green flag session will run, we could of course see a caution at any moment, and that will change the complexion of everything. But Abel DeMarco now out to a 1.2 second lead over Darian Arnsdorf. Now on lap 43. DeMarco out to a big lead. Still no caution for this long run. And now, Abel DeMarco, his lead jumps out to about a second, or exactly 1.5 seconds. Arnsdorf and DeMarco are both winless this season, but of course, as we said before, Abel DeMarco, 4 wins last season en route to an eventual championship. And DeMarco last season, he had one of the worst struggles that you can imagine. Having an okay finish in the first 2 races at Daytona, or I should say just 1 race at Daytona, and then he was in the lead at Atlanta when we went under green with 2 laps to go, and guess what? He ran out of gas from the lead, held up everyone, and eventually finished outside the top 10. Now remember, We only had 20 cars in the league at that time, so outside of the top 10 meant you finished in the bottom half of all drivers for that race. And that was the one and only race that, or I should say one of two races that Larry Barker won during his one and only season in the league. He won Atlanta and Kentucky, two sort of cookie-cutter racetracks. And then DeMarco had somewhat poor finishes at Darlington, at Martinsville. I remember he DNF'd at Martinsville after getting turned by Michael Chipson. As now, finally, we seem to be encountering some lapped traffic ahead. Take that as you will. We're now on lap 49 out of 100 at Walt Disney World. And right now ahead of DeMarco is three cars of Luis Aguilar, Gus Alvarez II, and Winty Wolf. If we take a look at the hood, you can see they're up there. They're not extremely far, but I wouldn't say that right now it's going to be a legitimate concern for at least the next 5 laps, unless those guys are way off the race pace. You can see if we look at a speed comparison, Abel DeMarco, running about 130. These guys are topping at about 150. They might actually be running a little bit faster than DeMarco, which is why he can't catch it. But he will come off of turn number 3, and Abel DeMarco will lead at least half of this race. We have 50 laps to go as we now enter the second half of this Walt Disney World 100. Now, basically, everyone ahead of DeMarco is running single file. So take that as you will, but right now it looks like Darian Arnsdorf is starting to close in a tiny bit on the 22. Will we be able to catch him, though, before we have another interruption, which could be either green flag pit stops or a caution. Whatever it is, it does make it interesting with the three of Winty Wolf slowly getting reeled in by Abel DeMarco. Right now, I'd say the 3 is about less than a half second in front of DeMarco. Eric Carmona's way back there. I mean, Wyatt Floor is about 4 seconds behind the leader. It's essentially a battle between the 22 and the 98 right now. 98 runs a little bit tight off the corner. The 98 is right on the bumper of the 22. He's very, very close. But the question is, will he make a move? Because I don't know. There seems to be a lot of brake checking happening in the front of the pack. As now Kyle Driscoll coming off of pit lane. Do we see some pit stops? No, not really. Just Kyle Driscoll, I guess, either having some issues or because he might be going to pit lane. That might be his thing. Yeah, I think what he's doing is he's going to pit lane. That's why he pulled off to the side. Definitely interesting. We'll see what happens to the 80 of Kyle Driscoll. Question is, will he go into the garage, or is it just a normal pit stop? So Kyle Driscoll now getting looks like going to be 4 tires. Yep, 4 tires for Kyle Driscoll. And a little bit of Sunoco Racing fuel as well. He'll just get, yeah, that's probably good. The question is, will that start the green flag pit stops? Because you can tell me if I'm wrong or not, but that could potentially start green flag pit stops, or Kyle Driscoll could be short pitting, which would be even better. Back into the picture, and so is Wyatt Floor, who's within a second of the leader after just a few laps ago being 4 seconds off the pace, or 4 seconds off the leader. The question is, will anyone challenge Abel DeMarco? I don't know, but he might just make a pass on Winty Wolf. That's exactly what he will do. Wolf will now fall a lap down. Now just 38 cars on the leader. Or excuse me, 37, because Kyle Driscoll is now 2 laps down. But as we can see, Kyle Driscoll racing on the track, still doing his thing, still doing his work. But Winty Wolf way off the races. Arnsdorf is getting closer as he brake checks again. Getting a little bit redundant at this point. Arnsdorf in the middle lane. Winty Wolf might get on his quarter panel if he doesn't move. The 3 of Winty Wolf has now fallen basically back to basically where Area Carmona is, but it's also holding up the 0 car. Now coming off turn 3 again, I cannot count how many times Abel DeMarco has just dominated here at Disney. We're on lap 65. He has led every single lap. Pretty darn impressive if you ask me, but as we go down the backstretch once again, I think we know what time it is. It's time to crank it up. And just as we come back from the Crank It Up segment, Darian Arnsdorf has taken the lead away from Abel DeMarco, as for the first time in our 68-lap event so far... Oh, okay. I might have jumped the gun. We are going to see green flag pit stops. So, as expected, Abel DeMarco is back in the lead, and he's going to lead the lap. But if we check in, a lot of cars are going to pit lane, including... Oh, I switched to the cockpit. Hold on. We can see just a lot of cars going to pit lane, including Ryan Adama, Area Carmona, Chase Buck, Richard Birmingham, Darian Arnsdorf, Creed Daniel, Wyatt Floor. Let's check in on Creed Daniel. And right now, it looks like he's going to be getting some four tires, and that looks like that's going to be all. He's going to get some Sunoco fuel as well. He will leave pit lane behind Richard Birmingham. The race on pit road looks like it's going to be Darian Arnsdorf winning that. That can't be too good for Abel DeMarco, as he's now just finally getting his pit stop in. We are seeing a lot of guys on pit road right now. Boy, oh boy, is it getting interesting. Abel DeMarco's on pit road. Patrick Starr comes off of pit road. This is not good for the 22 because, you know, he pitted late. I mean, yeah, he pitted with everyone else, but just doesn't seem like the most wise move that the 22 can make. As there is the 22 coming off of pit road. Still Darian Arnsdorf. Coming off of 2, he'll go into 3 and presumably lead the lap. Not exactly sure what they're going to score it as. Yes, they will have him lead the lap. And Richard Birmingham now in second. So this spreads out the field even more. Because the second place car, which is Richard Birmingham, is 4 seconds behind everyone else. Or is 4 seconds behind the leader. It does make it a little bit worrisome, but I don't think it's going to be a huge deal in hindsight. So right now the top 10 is looking like Darian Arnsdorf, followed by a bunch of lapped cars, and Richard Birmingham, Abel DeMarco in 3rd, Agristo Papageorgios in 4th, Creed Daniel in 5th, Chase Buck in 6th, who is your current points leader, by the way. He finished well at Daytona and also finished 2nd at Homestead. So you can imagine, after 2 back-to-back finishes, he is going to be running well. Now, with Chase Buck, the situation with him is that, of course, he has not won a race this season, but everyone else has been somewhat inconsistent. We've obviously seen some guys like Wyatt Floor always making a run for the front. Wyatt Floor led 18 laps at Daytona, and he still leads the league in most laps led, with 36, after leading a decent portion of Daytona and Homestead. So right now, I mean, he's doing well, but of course, even though he led 18 laps at Daytona, he still wrecked out on that lap 88 crash involving Esko Laukkanen and Brady Wilmington, and even more. And Darian Arnsdorf as well, he got involved in that as well, but that crash took out Wyatt Floor, took out a bunch of other guys, including Luis Aguilar. And the prime example of this is to take a look at Jack Husky, who right now is running in the 18th position, right in front of Carl McKinney and behind Jacob Thibodeau. The interesting case with him is that he finished, I believe, around 25th at Daytona, if I'm not mistaken. I can't pull up the official race results for that right now, but he finished outside of the top 20 at Daytona, I can assure that. He finished outside the top 20, but won Homestead. So right now, when it comes to the point standings, that puts him in the 13th position, because he gained 21 spots from 13th. So you just gotta look at it from that perspective, where Jack Husky, he's been a little inconsistent. He either DNF'd or was several laps down at Daytona, and then ended up pulling it out and winning at Homestead. One of the guys that has been consistent is Chase Buck. Now, he has an average finish of 10th right now, because he finished, I believe, 12th at Daytona, and ended up finishing 2nd at Homestead. And of course, we had that sort of comeback story where Chase Buck ended up going to pit lane on the pace lap for a splitter issue, came back out, thanks to lucky cautions and waiver rounds and all of that. He got back on the racetrack, even took the lead for a little, for, you know, his 15 seconds of fame, and ultimately finished 2nd to Husky. And another prime example is Gustav Adolf II in the 14. He DNF'd at Daytona after being involved in a crash early, and then also finished well at Homestead, finishing 3rd. So, I mean, there's literally nobody in our field that has had 2 top 10s this season. DeMarco, right now, has had 2 DNFs. So, if he can pull out with a 3rd place finish, right now the 22 car is sitting at 29th in points. And remember, I mean, that is such a drastic change, because Abel DeMarco won last season's championship after taking the lead around midway through the 2nd half of the season. Of course, Elon Green, man oh man, Elon Green, who drove the 88 Exalta Chevy for us in Season 1 and is no longer racing in our league. The interesting case with him, he actually had the points lead for the entire first half. The entire first half. And then he just kind of fell off, had 5 DNFs in the 12 races of the 2nd half, and had an average finish in the 2nd half of 16th. And for a 22-car field, that is just incredibly inept, or mediocre per se. And it just makes you think about all what can happen in this league of, you know, of virtuality and video games. Nothing is guaranteed, and that is absolutely made true by what we've seen so far this season with the inconsistency of all the drivers. We've seen many drivers DNF, we've seen many drivers, you know, wreck out or not do well. Take a look at Faris Khalil. He's a prime example of that. He actually started and parked at Homestead. He pulled off the racetrack on lap 2, and then just stayed on pit road for the next 105 laps. And that was the end of that. But after what had happened with Faris Khalil, he made some upgrades for Maple Motorsports and is now back on the racetrack. And even though he's one of the last cars on the lead lap, he's running 32nd. It's still not bad for what, you know, compared to what had happened before with the start and park incident at Homestead. Now, I mean, I was surprised to see Faris Khalil pull off the racetrack and do some sort of start and park. And I don't exactly know why he did that. And in the world of video games, I don't think anyone can explain. But with Faris Khalil, out of Ontario, Canada, back on the racetrack. I'm sure a lead lap finish would be great for him. And as we are on lap 87 out of 100, here's your top 10, currently looking like Darian Arnsdorf, Richard Birmingham, Abel DeMarco, who led the race for at least, half of the race. He led like 50 laps. And then Agristo Papageorgis, Creed Daniel, that's your top 5, followed by Chase Buck, Esko Laukkanen. And then Santiago Alvarez, Wyatt Floor, and Ryan Aiden. And then pulling through the rest of the field, if we take a look here, we have Nolo Hamilton in 11th, Stephanie Larson in 12th, Ty Rogers in 13th, Brady Wilmington in 14th, Dan Wilkins in 15th, Tim Moore in 16th, Jack Husky, who won at Homestead, in 17th, Jacob Thibodeau in 18th, Carl McKinney in 19th, Ethan Mitchell in 20th, that's your top 20, followed by Jay Monin, Patrick Starr, that's 22nd, Christian Coppola and Kyle Driscoll, Brooks Bergen-Smith making his first race, Bryce Durlocker, Greg Shetner, Mitchell Collins, Jay Bird, and Luis Aguilar, that's your top 30. And then to round out the rest of the field, we have Leo King, Arthur Xavier, and Faris Khalil. That is all the cars on the lead lap. And then you have Aria Carmona, who went from 40th to 34th, Dakota Bennett, who's elevated up to 2nd, David Iller, Winty Wolf, and then Felix Rizzo, and then also Armin Salvador. I sort of feel bad for the 64 because they are making their debut. Goodness, they're trying their gosh darn hardest. But right now they are in 40th in last. After they were involved in that accident, I just sort of feel bad because they put all this work in to get a race car out on the track late, way after the season started. Because we are on season for race 3 out of 26. Now somebody could join for next race at Darlington, and then essentially still be in contention for the points. I'd say after the first half, it's over. But you're obviously, during the course of the season, going to have drivers funnel in and out, and you're going to have to find some people to replace them. But Darian Arnsdorf, who wrecked out at Daytona and had some issues at Homestead, now is just 9 laps away from getting on the board with his first MSCCT win. They're going to start running into some more lap traffic. The question is, can Faris Khalil stay on the lead lap? I can imagine that it would be possible that they could possibly, in one way or another, just kind of block the leader. I mean, the crazy thing is, Richard Birmingham, despite being kind of locked up by all these lap cars, he is only about a second behind the leaders. The good thing about that is that if there's somehow a caution, a miraculous caution, that could change everything, and that could give Richard Birmingham a good shot at winning. But I honestly don't think there will be, because there's just not enough passing going on, period, to make it practical. Now 5 laps to go from Walt Disney World Speedway. Faris Khalil on the outside, Darian Arnsdorf on the inside. He will make the pass past Faris Khalil. So he is now a lap down. And actually, Faris Khalil will take that spot back, so I take my words back. Coming off of 3, I almost said 4 there. But remember, this is a 3-turn racetrack. Just 2 miles to go for Darian Arnsdorf here at Walt Disney World Speedway. He basically, with a 2-second lead now over the 47 of Richard Birmingham. There is the white flag. 1 more lap to go. Darian Arnsdorf getting caught up in a little bit of lap traffic, but I don't think that should matter in the long run, because Birmingham and Chicago and all those guys, they are way too far behind to even be a thought in the 98's mind. Coming off of turn number 2, and now coming off of turn number 3. Darian Arnsdorf is a winner in the Modern Stock Car Cup Tour at Walt Disney World Speedway. So there it is. The results are showing on the screen now. Darian Arnsdorf, Richard Birmingham, Abel DeMarco, Agristo Papageorgis, Chase Buck finishing in the top 5. Chase Buck with his second top 5 of the season. Creed Daniel, Santiago Alvarez, Esko Laukkanen, Wyatt Floor, and Ryan Adema finishing your top 10. This has been Dan Wilkins, your commentator for the MSCCT. We will see you guys next time for the Southern 200 at Darlington Raceway. Boy, oh boy, will that be a fun race. We'll see what happens next time. We'll see you guys next.